We love being able to go to the different high school, colleges, middle schools to live broadcast sporting events around the area. Georgia Alabama Sports Live appreciates all the fan support, but without a presenting sponsor like Glynn Smith Chevrolet and GMC and Opelika, none of this would be possible. So we want to say thank you so much. Go to glennsmith.com. That is right, glennsmith.com. See all the inventory and see why people always say you're ready to smile. Thanks, everyone, and thank you to Glynn Smith Chevrolet and GMC for being our presenting sponsor. What is up and what is good, everyone? Thrift, Barringer, Richard Holdridge. It's Georgia Alabama Sports Live show. As you can see behind me in the background, I am on vacation. I have been gone since Friday, and I said, see ya, went to the beach, and I'm enjoying some R&R as we get into the talking area region play that's going to then immediately turn into playoffs for high school baseball. So we'll be calling a lot of games here coming up in the next few weeks, trying to recuperate after a long basketball and then straight into baseball season. Feel like we didn't even get a break, Richard, because as soon as basketball was over, boom, straight into baseball as well. You've been knocking it out the park as well. But we want to thank y'all so much for joining us. We are doing one show this week, and we're also talking about what else we have on hand on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. But, Richard, how was your Easter Sunday and how was your Easter weekend?
It was good, Thrift, spending time with the family, and I just enjoy just sitting back and just enjoying my family. And I also did catch some sports as well, and we're getting ready to go on vacation again as it is my kid's spring break. But
Yep.
I just been enjoying some R&R.
Yeah, a lot of Muscogee County schools and I think a lot of the private schools all have spring break this week. I know Central had it not last week, but the week before. Glenwood had it last week. So these last couple of weeks, these are spring break weeks as everyone's getting ready towards the end of the school year and the end of sports for high school for the 2023-2024 calendar year. I want to say thank you so much to Rick Beach. He did an excellent job on the call for the Northgate-Harris County game that was Friday. Harris County won. Congratulations to them. We'll talk about them when we do our high school baseball ratings that we do every week. We're dropping it again this week, as we always do. And he also did a good job with Pacelli Calvary. That was Saturday morning. But how about Christopher Gates, our producer? We love him so much. I mean, between me and you, Richard, we blow his phone up because that's our guy. And he makes the engine run, him and Toygar, but specifically Chris, because he has been just grinding game after game. And he also did play-by-play. So he produced, ran the score, and did play-by-play as LaGrange beat Calvary in a really good 3-2 game. 2-run homer for LaGrange late in that one. And it ended up sending them over the top. But great job by Chris Gates and great job by everybody on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live staff. As myself, you, and Toygar, we're out. It's okay. Still got Chris, Noah Shelton, Rick Beach. Teamwork makes the dream work, as DJ Jones says.
Absolutely, Thrift. As I see that this brand is just continuing to grow, when you and I go out of town, I mean, we can rely on people to fill in for us. And I thought that Chris and Rick did an amazing job this past weekend, and I really enjoyed listening to the game while I was out of town.
Yeah.
And we want to see Calvary win, but they did fall 2 games on Saturday. But they've had a long break, and so coming back into the swing of things. I mean, we'll talk about that later in the baseball ratings. But as we just continue just grinding and knocking out these games, it's really given a lot of these baseball teams exposure, including teams outside of the normal area that we cover. I mean, that we've called 2 LaGrange games already, and that they're considered the Chattahoochee Valley, but they're in Troup County, and I know they appreciated us being at the branch and covering that game, and we just want to continue, giving these other teams coverage.
Yeah, and thank you again for Chris allowing us to do that. We're going to do some more LaGrange games coming up. We still got Central, and then we're going to have playoffs. We know we'll be doing the Glenwood and Calvary State Championship games if they make it, and we expect them to in gaps. And I'm probably going to end up doing the GIAA Baseball State Championships as well, Richard. I know that's all the way in Savannah. I'm going to try to get you to come for at least one day with me, maybe. Come out there and call some baseball because you love baseball and you're doing a great job. But it's going to be fun seeing how a lot of these teams shape up as they head into the meat grinder of the season right now, area/region play. But today's show, presented by Glynn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. We're going to talk some March Madness coming up here in the next 2 minutes or so. After we talk that, Richard, we'll talk men's and women's. I'm going to give my opinion on Kim Mulkey's situation in the Washington Post piece, also the LA Times piece, and everything that is surrounding the Kim Mulkey LSU program. After we hit on that, we will then talk some Major League Baseball, just a little bit. Opening day, just a quick thoughts. Richard's got a rant. Richard's rant. Can't wait to hear that. Can't wait. He's already fired up, and we played 3 games of 162. But my man Richard's fired up already. We'll hear about that. You're not going to want to miss it. And then we'll promote, because coming up here next week or the week after, we're going to have Tyler Redmond. And I don't think there's a better MLB analyst and Braves guy that covers the Braves better than Tyler Redmond. Looking forward to talking to him, get his predictions. We'll lay out ours as we do our entire MLB 2024 preview, as we do with all the sports. And then we'll end it with the high school baseball ratings. So, Richard, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the Final Four. So, obviously, I didn't have any of these teams other than potentially Duke and Tennessee. I had both them in my Final Four, and they had a chance. All right, UConn, Illinois. I had Illinois in the Elite Eight. I didn't have UConn because I had them losing to Auburn. And then, Arizona was supposed to be in the Final Four. Obviously, bracket busted is what I'm trying to get. Is the point I'm trying to get at as I'm rambling on. But seeing Auburn choke the way they did against Yale, now Bruce Pearl's coming out, and I hate this about fan bases, that they're going after Chad Baker-Mazara to the point where Bruce Pearl's got to come out and say, leave my son alone. This is the reason why Coach K retires, is because of fan bases that start getting unrealistic expectations. They don't have the history to have those expectations, a.k.a. an Auburn basketball program before Bruce Pearl, and yet you're going after Chad Baker-Mazara. But then now that Alabama makes the Final Four as well, that's got to be a tough pill to swallow. You win the SEC tournament. You beat Alabama like a drum at home. You lost to them by like one or two or overtime. It was a close game at Alabama. You had the better season. You ultimately had the deeper and better team. Yet that didn't matter. And I told you from the beginning, Richard, to win this tournament, the main thing you really have to have is elite guards. And they do. Mark Sears, Griffin, these guys shot the lights out. They scored over 80 points in almost every game of the NCAA tournament. 72 against Grand Canyon, but 80 against Clemson, 80 against UNC, 109 against Charleston. I mean, they may not play the greatest defense, but that doesn't matter. They hit shots, they got on fire, and now they're in the Final Four. What do you got to say about Nate Oates' team in Alabama?
Well, Nate Oates has done a fantastic job, not only getting Alabama to the Final Four for the first time in school history, but 4 straight tournament appearances, including an overall #1 seed last year. When you think of Alabama basketball, I do think of the early 2000s when they went to 5 straight tournaments, including an Elite Eight appearance in 2004, which, by the way, this upcoming Final Four matchup between Alabama and UConn, is a rematch of the Elite Eight matchup where UConn ended up winning and going to the Final Four. I mean, that team had Kennedy Winston. You have like Colin Sexton, Robert Ory, Latrell Sprewell. I mean, Alabama basketball, which I've been to a game at Coleman Coliseum. I know that the fan base for Alabama basketball is not as big as football, but there are Alabama basketball fans out there that are excited, like Auburn was excited in 2019 that they were in the Final Four. I mean, look, I know that Alabama basketball it's not the brand like Alabama football, and I know that UConn is a heavy favorite against Alabama in the Final Four. But Alabama does play offense. I just think that UConn's just playing another level. I mean, this is going to be one of those games. It could be a mismatch, but anything can happen. I'm happy for the Crimson Tide. I'm happy for the Alabama fan base, even though, Thrift, you and I know I've talked to Alabama football fans that I nudge them like, hey, what do you think of Alabama in the Final Four? They could care less. Seriously, there is an Alabama football fan base that does not care about Alabama basketball.
Well, that's a shame, and I don't agree. If I see anyone like that, I'm going to tell them you should be ashamed of yourself. Nate Oates changed that mindset of it's only Alabama football that matters. Now Alabama basketball is one of the top 10, 15 programs in the last 5 years. Credit to Nate Oates. He came in. He's implemented his system. He replaced 6 players from last year's team that was the number 1 overall seed this year, Richard, guys like Grant Nelson, Griffin, and then Mark Sears being an elite guard that's putting up over 20 points a game. It reminds me a lot of that Auburn team that had Jared Harper and Bryce Brown that made it to the Final Four. They had guards that got hot. That's what happened here with Alabama. Guards that get hot can take you a long way. The problem is they're playing the best college basketball team I've seen since that loaded Florida team in 06-07. I'm talking about from top to bottom. They got bigs. They got stretch forwards. They got wing. They got 2 guards that can light it up from the outside. They got point guards. They run NBA action stuff. I mean, they are the biggest machine that we've seen in college basketball, probably going back to that 2017-18 Villanova team. I mentioned the Florida team because that's the deepest team, and this team's doing something on the president of that Florida team, which was loaded, returning a lot of players and experience. I'll bring up the Villanova team in the aspect of just dominating everybody that is put in front of them. I haven't seen a run like this. I know they did that last year, but this year they've had to face some really good teams, and they have dominated everybody, including Illinois, beating them by 25, and did not expect that. I think this UConn team is loaded. Remember Villanova, they had Jalen Brunson that year with Mikal Bridges, Jay Wright. Dante DiVincenzo was a 6th man, putting up 25. They beat everybody like a drum on the way to a national championship. That team was really good. This UConn team is just as good as that one. And on the run it's on, they have not had anyone come close to them in 2 NCAA tournaments. Danny Hurley has turned UConn into a powerhouse. And I'm going to go in a hot take alert. I think what he's doing and what he has the potential to do is going to surpass the great Jim Calhoun. And I think Jim Calhoun's one of the greatest coaches of all time. 5 Final Fours, 3 national championships, elite players that play in the NBA for a long time, including Caron Butler, Rip Hamilton, Ray Allen. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's elite players that have come from University of Connecticut. And UConn wouldn't have been a premier destination for a coach like Danny Hurley if it wasn't for what Jim Calhoun built. But, man, since he took over Kevin Ollie, this team has been unbelievable. And I know what you're going to say, Richard, because you went on your tear. That 2011 team was lucky that won a national title. 2014, it couldn't get more lucky. Kevin Ollie got fired a few years later. That was just an unbelievable run that was unprecedented. Did not expect something like that to happen. That's also the same year that Kentucky, as an 8 seed, made it to the national championship. That was pretty incredible to see what UConn was able to do. But this is different. This is not luck. They are the best team. And I don't care if they had to play 4 straight number 1 seeds or 4 straight number 1 and number 2 seeds, Richard, they would have beat all of them. They are elite. They are the best team. They are the favorite. If Alabama beats them, I put this as up one of the greatest upsets we've seen. Going back to that Villanova, Georgetown upset national championship. It would be pretty incredible. Give me your thoughts on UConn as they just tear through the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, if Alabama beats UConn, that'll be the biggest upset in the first round of the Final Four since Duke beat UNLV in 1991. I mean, that's how big of an upset. UConn's
I
a
think
double-digit
that's a great
favorite.
point. I think that's a great point. And I know that UNLV team was undefeated. UConn's not. I don't care about them. I'm talking about talent. I'm talking about the way they are dominating everyone like UNLV did during that 2-year stretch. You're right. That's a good comparison, Richard. The only thing with Alabama is, though, they don't have Christian Laettner. They do got Mark Sears, but you need a Christian Laettner to be in a UNLV team. I don't see that. I mean, a UConn team, because UConn's going to be able to throw a lot of things, and they're going to try to play Alabama off the three-point line, let them play inside, drive to the rack. And guess what? When you drive to the rack against UConn, Donovan Clingan's going to send that out of here like he did against Terrence Shannon and the entire Illinois Illini. Richard, you called them out. You said they're lucky. You got to eat the crow.
I'm eating crow.
I mean, you got to eat it, Richard.
Well, as far as this year, they're the best team in college basketball. Those previous years, look, they backdoored their way into championships previous years. If they win the national championship, they have flat out earned it because they were the number 1 overall seed. They dominated everybody that's been in front of them. I picked Illinois to beat UConn, so I'm eating crow on that. I mean, they went on a 30-0 run. This game was tied at 23, and then UConn just dominated.
Unbelievable, and went up by 30 points on them. I know Brad Underwood is like, Jesus. I mean, I got a good team. If I'm in any other bracket right now, if I'm playing Purdue, if I'm playing anybody, I am in the Final Four. But I had to play against them guys. That's why if you're Auburn, even if you beat Yale and you beat San Diego State, you weren't getting past UConn. You should be more mad at the fact that Alabama got the seed it did and got the bracket it did and did not win the SEC tournament. That's where Auburn fans should be upset about. It's like, hey, why did they get the easier path than we did? But credit Alabama, credit to UConn. The Duke Blue Devils. I thought this was going to be the year John Shire, wrote his own history when it comes to Duke. But he's learning that it's hard. And NC State is on an incredible run. And I think it's on a run that reminds me a lot of when the Jimmy Valvano. I know you watched the Survive and Advance 30 for 30. The 5 in a row in the ACC tournament, the shots they needed, including the banked-in one in overtime and the semifinal against Virginia, to even send them to overtime, I mean, they've had some luck, but they've also taken care of business. And in this NCAA tournament, Richard, they have handled their own. They smoked Marquette, and they just bullied Duke in the second half. DJ Burns, that guy is a stud. That's a 6'8" lineman that is just having every Duke player bounce off of him as he gets and one after and one after and one. Kevin Keats, again, proving another reason why maybe pressure helps some of these coaches because it galvanized the entire team because he was going to be fired. From fired to the penthouse of college basketball, maybe a national championship. I know I said Alabama beat UConn, but that would be nothing in comparison if NC State made it to the national title and upset UConn. That means they beat Zach Edey and Purdue, and then they beat UConn. They beat mighty Duke. This would be the most incredible run we have seen from a team like this that was not expected to do anything in the NCAA tournament. Wow. How about the NC State Wolfpack and the Lady Wolfpack, who also made it? We'll talk women's here in a moment, but how about the NC State tearing through their bracket and manhandling Duke the way it did? Because it was close. I thought Duke was going to come out on top. McCain started hitting shots at the end, but it was too late by then because NC State just had implemented their will through the hands of DJ Burns.
Yeah, and Filipowski fouled out. DJ Burns. I mean, imagine Jadeveon Clowney playing basketball. I mean, this is really the picture I want to give everybody. But this NC State Wolfpack team was 17-14 entering the ACC tournament. This wasn't even a bubble team. I mean, they had a record that probably they'd be lucky to get into the NIT. I mean, this was what Georgia's record was, and that's another story, by the way. Georgia's in the semifinal of the NIT, but.
Yeah.
NC State, 5 games in 5 days. I mean, they had some close wins. They had to win the ACC tournament to get in this tournament. They were an 11th seed. They knocked off Texas Tech. Got a little bit of a break playing Oakland. I admit, you're playing a 14th seed, so that you get to the Sweet 16. And I thought that NC State getting to play Duke for the 3rd time this year and a team they beat in the ACC tournament, I actually liked NC State in this game because of the familiarity with Duke and the ACC. And what can you say about DJ Burns Jr.? 29 points. The guy was a beast. And I cannot wait. We talked about this before the show even started. That matchup against Zach Edey. Wow. It's going to be must-see TV for the Final Four this weekend.
It is. And can't wait. And you mentioned Zach Edey. Him and Dalton Kennett put on a show.
Was fun.
Dalton Kennett can flat out play, and he will be in the NBA. And he reminds me of Chandler Parsons, but even better scorer than Chandler Parsons was. And Chandler Parsons, before he got hurt, was a really good NBA guy that got a mega contract from either Mavericks. I think it was the Mavericks after he had that great couple seasons early on with the Houston Rockets. Dalton Kennett reminds me of him, and he's going to have a fantastic NBA career. But him and Edey going back and forth, 40 and 37 respectively, just a battle. But Tennessee, they just didn't have anybody inside that could match up with him. And outside of Dalton Kennett, they have offensive identity issues. They needed one more score. If they had another like a Grant Williams or anybody that could just give Dalton Kennett a break and match up a little bit, half the production. I'm talking 15 points, not even 20. Of the 40 from Zach Edey, Tennessee wins this game by 10 because their defense is so good. But Ziegler was bad. Pascovia, I mean, he was a no-show. In his senior year, I don't even know why he came back this year. He was irrelevant. I thought he would have been a factor. But Kennett played sensational. And Rick Barnes, again, just loses another Elite Eight. He has not, ever since he made that 03 Final Four, he's lost in Elite Eight in 06, 08, now this year with Tennessee. So he's 0-3 in his last 3 Elite Eights. Tennessee comes up short. I thought we were going to get maybe 2 SEC teams in the Final Four. Still get one for all the trash and the shit talk everybody had about Kentucky and Auburn losing. They still had an SEC team in the Final Four. You still had Tennessee in the Elite Eight. I still think it turned out a pretty good year. For the SEC. Wanted it to be better, but the fact they have at least one team in it, I know Greg's I can't even think now. Greg Sankey, he'll be happy with that. Richard, any thoughts on the Final Four? Because this is the only show we're going to be doing this week. So this is our prediction time. I got UConn and Purdue in the Natty. I got Edey versus Klingon. I got the elite offense of UConn against a really good shooting Purdue team. Are they going to double? Are they going to let Klingon go one-on-one with Edey? If he gets in foul trouble, that changes up everything. Purdue could be the one team that could handle UConn. Do you got a 1 versus 1, or you see NC State and Alabama pulling off an upset?
No, I'm with you, Thrift. I got 1 versus 1. Purdue in the Final Four for the first time since 1980.
How about that?
When you think of great Purdue teams, number 1 overall seed in 1994, led by Glynn Robinson, they get upset by Duke. What about that team 2 years ago? The one last year that got upset by Fairleigh Dickinson. They were a number 1 seed.
Last year was bad, but 2 years ago with Jaden Ivey, Edey, I mean, that team was loaded, and you couldn't even beat St. Daggum Peters.
They lost to double-digit seeds. The last 3 tournaments leading up to this tournament, they lost to double-digit seeds. They lost to Ohio the year before. And so they were expected to be here, And so they finally get the monkey off their back. And congratulations to Coach Matt Painter. And, the Purdue Boilermakers, you think a great NBA players. I talked about the big dog, Glenn Robinson, was one of my favorite players growing up in the 90s. How about Brad Miller playing for the Pacers and the Kings? Robbie Hummel, he could shoot the lights out. Carson Edwards, Joe Barry Carroll, a lot of great Purdue basketball players. I know that if you're a Boilermaker, Drew Brees has got to be ecstatic right now. He is probably the most famous Purdue Boilermaker of all time.
Let me say this, too. They've had some great teams, man. The teams with Robbie Hummel, E'Twaun Moore, and Jawan Johnson. Then Robbie Hummel hurts his knee in that 2010 season. They were 24-3, ranked third in the country. He tears his knee, and he's out for the rest of that season and the next season. So he didn't even get to play his senior year with Moore and Jawan Johnson. So that team could have won a national title, but injuries derailed it, and they made a Sweet 16 run in back-to-back years, but just couldn't overcome the injury bug. Then they had the years of, Caleb Swanigan, A.J. Hammonds, and they made a Sweet 16, and they lost in the first round. Then they had the team with Carson Edwards, Vince Edwards, and Isaac Haas. That team should have went all the way. They don't. They make it to the Sweet 16. That's it. The next year they make it to the Elite Eight, almost beat Virginia, and had Diakite hit that floating shot to send Virginia to overtime, or Purdue would have made it that year to the Final Four. All that to say, I don't think this is their best team under Matt Painter, but this is their best player. And he said, get on my back, I will carry us. And that's exactly what Zach Edey did. And right now we're getting a Purdue-UConn. And honestly, if you ask me, the most consistent teams these last two seasons, regular season-wise, it's been Purdue and UConn. And now with their run this year, Purdue and UConn have been the most consistent teams all season and through the NCAA tournament. That should be the national title, but I wouldn't put it past Purdue and DJ Burns. You're talking about two big bodies just colliding. Behemoths, Edey and Burns just going at each other. That's going to be fun. But that Edey Klingon and that UConn-Purdue matchup, that's what everybody wants to see. And I hope that's what we get. That could be a monster win. And by the way, Nance is out, Iron Eagle in, and I've been impressed with Iron Eagle. I love him and Raftery and Grant Hill, and I've enjoyed it. Richard, I've enjoyed it. I can't wait for him to do his first Final Four. Should be a lot of fun. Alabama, UConn, NC State, Purdue. That's the Final Four we got, and looking forward to finally maybe getting two number ones going in a national title. I don't think we've had that, Richard. I'm trying to think in which we had two number ones going at it. Last time that would have been 2017, North Carolina and Gonzaga, when that was a really good matchup. Remember, Gonzaga only had one loss, and Nigel Williams-Goss took on a really good Kennedy Meeks, Isaiah Hicks, and the rest of the guys. So now moving on, we're going to talk about the girls, but just real quickly, Richard, can you get that off? And let's go to me and you as we talk about the upcoming schedule before we talk about the women's. So this week, we got today, of course, the Georgia-Alabama Sports Live Show coming up. And, I'll say about an hour, 7:30, Rick Beach on the call, Pacelli and Shaw. So looking forward for that one. Potentially Opelika Central either Wednesday or Thursday. We haven't decided which one. But that one's still on the fence with that one. We'll let you know if we're going to be there or not. And then on Saturday, CVCC, the softball and baseball programs are making their inaugural debut on Georgia-Alabama Sports Live. We got a doubleheader for softball, doubleheader for baseball. You're going to have Noah Shelton and Chris Gates on the calls, respectively. Looking forward to that. I will be emceeing, as y'all saw in my post today, I will be emceeing the Food Truck Festival. This is my sixth straight Food Truck Festival. I'll be the host and MC with DJ Mike Kelly of Q1073, part of my job at PMP, and looking forward to doing that. So that's all be Saturday, but we'll have baseball and softball for CVCC. And then next week, Richard, you got a couple games you're going to be doing. I know Jordan's probably going to be making up an appearance here soon. We got some other great games. April the 11th, we got Calvary and Glenwood. I mean, next week should be a lot of fun. But this week, we got today, no more show or anything until next Sunday. Me and Rich will be back live as we'll be back from vacation, rejuvenated, ready to talk national championship because the Final Fours have already happened. So looking forward to the rest of this week. Make sure to like us on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. Women's, though, we got South Carolina. Looks like they're on pace to go undefeated and give Dawn Staley her second natty after that heartbreaking loss last year. Our third natty, after that heartbreaking loss to Iowa last year. NC State women's upset Stanford and Cara Vanderveer and upset Texas, the number 1 seed. And now NC State women's, along with the men's, make it back to the Final Four. It's NC State's first Final Four, I think, since they had Kay Powell. Remember Coach Powell, legendary coach there at NC State. Took them to multiple Final Fours. I think won a national championship too. And now they're back to relevancy, and they're going to be taking on. So we got Carolinas taking on each other in the Final Four. That should be a lot of fun to watch. But South Carolina, they're just on another level. They had a couple scares. Go back up to their bracket, Richard, if you will. South Carolina, I think you're going to have to go up to the top. And as you can see right here, they beat Indiana by 4. That one's close. Blew out North Carolina First Presbyterian and handled Oregon State. Indiana gave them a run for their money. I thought they should be held their head up high, competing against South Carolina the way they did. But coming up in about, 45 minutes, 7:15, Richard, Iowa and LSU. Man, we've been wanting this.
We have.
I'm going to say this. Caitlin Clark, I mean, she's been getting a lot of calls, and obviously if you're the NCAA and if you're women's basketball, you needed this matchup. I mean, the ratings are going to be through the roof. This is probably going to get better ratings than any of the Elite Eight games from the men's combined. Everybody's going to be watching this. Van Leith, Clark, Reese, Iowa. And now, because of the piece that came out from the LA Times, I'm not going to talk about the Kim Mulkey piece from the Washington Post and Kent Babb, but from the LA Times, making it about good versus evil, basically saying LSU is the bad guys. Haley Van Lee said there's some racial undertone to it. And I think I'm in agreement with her. You see a lot of way Caitlin Clark acts. Angel Reese acts like that, people calling her out. I think there's always been a double standard, especially when it comes to black athletes. You saw that with LeBron James. There was an excellent article, Richard, I cannot think of the author's name, written on ESPN.com that talked about how, the skin color of Stephen Curry being light-skinned had a lot to do with why LeBron James was upset the way America was treating him. Because the lighter you are, you're seeing white America gravitate towards that. And I'm thinking that's happening now for sure with Iowa and LSU. And the LA Times writing this about the way LSU acts, their demeanor, the way they bully people. I didn't like how it was written, but I understand why you write it, because right now, Mulkey, Reese, Van Leith, LSU, if you want to get clicks, you're writing about them. And LSU has the defense and I think the athletes with Flo J, with Van Leith, and multiple options to throw at Caitlin Clark to have Reese down low to mitigate her driving. I'm going to say LSU, unless there's some catastrophic thing and a meltdown where the Van Leith just has a bad game. Remember, she was benched in the NCAA tournament in the second half, whether it be Angel Reese just getting a tech, getting ejected or something. Unless something like that happens, if LSU's playing its best, and even with Caitlin Clark playing her best, I still think LSU wins this game. And I think we're going to get LSU South Carolina national title. But I wouldn't be surprised if Caitlin Clark played out of her mind to prove, and she's got a chip on her shoulder from last year. But I think Kim Mulkey, as said in the article from Washington Post, she likes this mantra of being the bad guy. It helps motivate her team. Even though Van Leaf says she feels like that they didn't use that article as motivation because they think it's disrespectful and sexist, racist. But I think LSU beats Iowa. What about you?
I think LSU having a close game against UCLA, which I saw the last part of that game, and it looked like LSU was going to lose that game, but they found a way to pull away and beat UCLA. Iowa has just been blowing the doors out of everybody. I mean, the way they beat Colorado, Caitlin Clark has been absolutely sensational. But you're right, LSU does have the defense to slow down Caitlin Clark. So the only way I think that Iowa wins this game is she gets her teammates more involved. I mean, she cannot be scoring 50% of the points.
And I'll say this too, Richard. I said Richard. Richard. If the referees, if they called the game the way it was called for Iowa in that second round matchup, and they get someone in foul trouble like an Angel Reese, it could change the game. So again, outside factors. I'm going off of if it's a clean called game, both teams are playing their best. I think LSU has more power, but it's hard to say without outside factors. Richard, you're telling me that the referees, I think they would rather see Caitlin Clark in the Final Four. And if I'm not calling for the referees saying they're cheating and this conspiracy theory, but this would be a game something like that happens. Don't you agree?
I agree. I also think that the marquee game that people aren't paying attention to is UConn and USC. Paige Buecher's going up against Juju Watkins.
Yeah, those two girls can flat out play. And for people that are in the know and watch the sport, Juju Watkins, who is only a freshman, Richard, she's more athletic than a Caitlin Clark. And I think she would take, if she does beat, let's say Iowa wins and USC wins, Juju's going to want to pick her up full court. I'd love to see that matchup, but I would even love to see even more Paige Buecher's. Because Paige Buecher's was Caitlin Clark when she was a freshman 2 years ago before she got hurt, before Caitlin Clark. Everybody talked about the freshman sensation Buecher. She gets hurt. Caitlin Clark comes on the scene. The rest has been history. You know she's going to want to take down Caitlin Clark. And I would love that matchup, but I don't think that's what we're going to get. I think LSU's going to win. I'm going UConn, LSU, South Carolina, NC State. That's my Final Four. South Carolina and LSU in the national title. What do you got? All SEC.
That'd be a good final, all SEC. I actually got South Carolina and Iowa in the final. I think that Caitlin Clark is going to get the job done. I don't know if they beat South Carolina because South Carolina is going to try to avenge that Final Four loss where they were upset. It's just that Dawn Staley has got the new UConn. I mean, South Carolina is what UConn was in the early 2000s when they had Diana Taurasi.
I want to say this too, Richard.
All right.
I don't think that I would have a problem other than NC State. I'm not saying I have a problem with them, but I want South Carolina in it. But if you're telling me South Carolina versus Juju Watkins, Paige Buecher's, LSU, or Iowa, any of those four teams, I think that's going to be a fantastic Final Four and a fantastic national championship. I think, unlike the boys, you're not losing with any of those teams.
Not at all.
So who's your Final Four?
Well, obviously my Final Four is going to be Iowa and UConn. And then you have South Carolina and NC State on the other bracket, which South Carolina and Iowa in the championship.
You think Caitlin Clark gets hot? Is that what you're thinking?
I do. I think that she makes it back to the championship, but does not win it because South Carolina is just too strong, and they'll avenge that Final Four loss from last season. But quite an accomplishment to get to the championship 2 years in a row. Just can't finish the job and cannot win a title.
If she doesn't win it, do you put her as the greatest of all time? I've seen these discussions, and it's like, how is Caitlin Clark, who is the greatest scorer in the history of men's and women's? She's got that many points, and she's been phenomenal. But, you got Dawn Staley coming out saying Paige Buecher's been the sickest, man, and she's got the best moves out of anyone. You got Gina Orium saying analytics are saying she's the best. And then to say Caitlin Clark's the greatest women's player of all time.
There's been some great
players, but she also hasn't played on a team like those Tennessee UConn teams because, in my opinion, no one's been greater than Diana Taurasi. She's always going to be number one in my heart.
How about Jackie Stiles?
Okay, Jackie Stiles.
Kelsey Plum, Shamanique Holslaw, Cheryl Swoops, Rebecca
Yeah.
Lobo.
Candace Parker.
Yeah, forgot about Candace Parker.
Cynthia Cooper. I mean, there's been a lot of ladies that can hoop. Lisa Leslie.
Teresa Edwards.
How about Teresa Edwards from Georgia? Excellent, Richard. How about who was I just about to say? I can't think of her name now. Gosh.
Ann Donovan.
Donovan. Now I just lost my train of thought. I literally was just about to say Reggie Miller, Cheryl Miller. Who scored 100 points in a high school game in like under, what was it, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. It was incredible. If she doesn't win it all, are you going to say she's the greatest of all time? Making it a back-to-back, taking Iowa to unprecedented heights, scoring as much as she did, and then saying that, you know what, as good as she's been, this is also a team award. It's not her fault she didn't win it all. But I can't say she's the greatest of all time. I'll put her in that air, but we don't have to compare. She can be when we talk college basketball, because there's so many airs, and same with the NBA. Michael Jordan, unanimous, but the rest is just like, who was the greatest in this era? And then you have a Mount Rushmore of the different greatest players from each era. Caitlin Clark's going to be one of those, one of the top 4 players of all time, but I can't put her in the greatest if she can't get a chip, because it's not fair. I know we when we talk women's sports, Bill Simmons made this comment. It's like we talk about it with our kid gloves on. Richard, anybody else like a Zach Edey, are we saying he's the greatest of all time if he doesn't win a national title? But if he does win a national title, 2-time National Naismith Player of the Year, the run he's on, scoring close to 30 points a game in the NCAA tournament, beating that UConn team, I'm willing to put Zach Edey as one of the greatest NCAA players we've ever seen. So if I want to say the same thing about Edey, I feel like we got to still do the same way about women's sports, because if we want women's sports to be talked about as the same way as men's, we got to hold them to the same standard. And I think we should, because I think the women's game is better than the men's is right now. Do you agree with that statement?
Yes, absolutely. The women's game right now is as popular as it has ever been. That LSU Iowa game last year drew 14 million people. We expect this Elite Eight game tonight to be the highest rated women's basketball game. Probably it could rival of all time. I think that's how big this. Everybody wanted to see this LSU Iowa matchup. I mean, the trash talk, the Angel Reese pointing at her finger, saying, "I'm about to get a ring," the "you can't see me" gesture. I mean, this is what the media loves. They are soaking this up, and we cannot wait.
LA Times article, like I said, making LSU the bad guy, Iowa the good guy. Reminds me a lot of Larry Bird, Magic Johnson. Magic was the bad guy, Larry was the good guy. The white and black that happens when talking sports, and it's happening right now before our eyes with Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. It's going to be a great game. Looking forward to it, and it's also in the women's game. It's being talked about as much as it is. So we're going to be getting off here shortly, because I know we're going to be eating our popcorn. Can't wait to watch that one.
Yep.
Excuse me. All right, let's get that out. Let's talk a little bit of Kim Mulkey going. We got Richard's rant, talk a little MLB, and then we'll wrap up the show, Richard, with some high school baseball ratings. So the Washington Post piece, I read it from top to bottom, and my opinion is this. I had no problem with it. I thought it was an excellent article. It made Kim Mulkey become human. And you see that. You saw that with Bill Belichick in the documentary, the Dynasty documentary Apple Plus put out. These coaches get put on this pedestal as godlike features, and Nick Saban. And when you add a human element to it, it makes it more relatable, and we can be like, dang, I feel how this person reacts or thinks the way she does. You know, it talks about her relationship with her dad, that it's been non-existent because her dad cheated on her mom and then remarried. And so when Kim decided to get married, he wanted to walk her down but have his wife be in the wedding or be up in the front. And Kim said, no, you embarrassed his family. You cheated on my mom. She's going to be sitting in the back. Well, the dad said, this is a deal breaker. I won't walk you down the aisle. Well, guess what? Kim says, I'm not budging. And this has been her mantra her entire life. and her dad didn't walk her down the aisle, and they have not talked since 30 years. And she credits her dad for the reason why she loves sports, why she was good at Louisiana Tech and coached as an assistant, almost won a national title, the reason why she was successful at Baylor. She gives all that credit to her dad, but she wanted a relationship because she holds a grudge. If you do one thing despite Kim Mulkey, you're dead to her. Also in the article, it talks about her religious background, Baylor being a Baptist college and not being a welcome university 20 years ago to women that are gay or lesbians. And they felt like she was sexist towards them. She was, they felt like that she treated them differently because of who they like and their sexual preference. There's been, I think Neiman was one of the players that helped her win a national title, hit like 5 threes in 2005, her first one. She transfers a year later. And in Kim Mulkey's book, she said that is just an anomaly. But Brittany Griner and her don't even talk. When Brittany Griner got arrested, Kim Mulkey made some tweets, but was not out in the forefront of saying, hey, get her back, get her back. Brittany Griner, she wrote a book, and in the book she credits Kim Mulkey for a lot of stuff in her basketball career, but personal relationship is lack thereof. And you've had some other athletes that have come out and said similar things. I'm not willing to go and say that Kim Mulkey is anti this, anti that. This is also, a lot of it is opinion. There is no proof of this, but it was just putting an element to a woman who is, I think, at the forefront of women's basketball. She is leading the charge. She has turned LSU in a quick amount of time and won a national title in 2 seasons. What she did at Baylor is phenomenal. 3 national titles. The woman is an excellent coach. But excellent coaches, Richard, and you're learning this, doesn't mean they're great people or they're good at relationships. You're seeing with Bill Belichick. He didn't have a relationship with almost any of his players. He burned a lot of bridges. He has players coming out and talking against them. As great as he was, not a great person. You're seeing Alabama. I'm talking to Stephen M. Smith. The vibe, it feels like everyone can breathe. They don't have to look over their shoulders because Nick Saban's gone. These coaches are elite, and Kim Mulkey is one of them. But it doesn't mean that they're also great people. They make mistakes. They hold grudges. They are human, okay? They will make mistakes. Maybe not as many in their professional life because that's why they're the greatest or one of the greatest. But in their personal life, they probably make just as many mistakes as me or you do, Richard. But we put them on that pedestal. We make them as role models. I honestly don't understand why Mulkey was taken back from it, why she didn't just give her side of the story, because I honestly think it was a really good piece. I didn't have a problem with it. I don't know what she's going to sue them on. I don't think there's anything they can sue them on. She didn't have any comments on any incidents. There were a couple of times at Baylor that a girl was kicked off because they said there was a fight that broke out between a girl and her ex-girlfriend and her ex-girlfriend's new girl. There was a fight that broke out. She was suspended. The girl ended up transferring, and there was no explanation. They're saying now that Mulkey kicked the girl off because she had marijuana, but the girl thinks it's because she was gay. So I don't care about that. I do care if people feel like they were mistreated because of their sexual orientation or their sexual preference. That should not happen, Richard. And I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But I don't think that's what this piece was about. This piece was about talking about Kim as a woman. I mean, she doesn't get offered the job at Louisiana Tech, okay? And she gets offered a 3-year contract. She wants a 5-year. Anyway, the president doesn't go to bat for her and doesn't give her this contract. She leaves, goes to Baylor. The rest is history. Well, she wins her first national title. That president then didn't give her the 5-year contract at Louisiana Tech, sends her a message saying, congratulations, I made a mistake. You were awesome. She said she didn't even read it. She sent it back to him. She sent letters back to her dad. She won't read them. She's a woman that holds a grudge. I feel like that's a lot of people that are successful, that are coaches like her. I don't think there was anything written in there that was bad enough to make me think, dang, something that I didn't expect from the way Kim Mulkey carries herself. I was not shocked by it. And that's my thought on it. Didn't have a problem with it. Well written. Kent Babb shouldn't have been thrown through the mud from her. And I thought this was excellent journalism. And a society and an era where there is lazy journalism. It's about first. It's about clickbait. It's about no integrity at all. It's just getting viewers. I don't think that's what this was about. Great job by Kent Babb. Any thoughts, Richard?
It was a very, very well-written article, and it just shows that Kim Mulkey is human, that she does have her flaws, but she is a great coach. And look what she did with the 3 titles at Baylor, now at LSU. I mean, if she wins a title at LSU again, and winning one last year, I mean, you got to put her up there with one of the greatest women's head basketball coaches of all time. I mean, because Gino Auriemma, even though he's great at UConn, he only did it at UConn. I mean, I think when you win multiple titles at different schools, it really puts you in a different level.
It does. And I also think UConn dominated an era which women's basketball wasn't at its peak. And that's why you're seeing UConn struggle now, because there is so much parity in women's basketball, unlike it was 15 years ago or 10 years ago when UConn was dominating the way it was. Doesn't take anything away from Gino Auriemma, but she's done it in multiple eras now. It's been impressive, to say the least. Her lack of relationships with her players, that's been a occurring thing, I think, with a lot of great coaches. I think they're so invested into knowing that, hey, if I can't invest in this player because eventually in college they move on after 4 years, or in the pros after a couple seasons, you may have to cut ties with them. That's why Belichick's saving all these guys. I don't think they have a great relationship with their players. Mulkey, too. I don't think she's any different from any of the other coaches. I thought it was a good article and have no problem with it. Richard, opening day just happened. The Braves shellacked the Phillies' first 2 games. Lost yesterday. They're 2-1. I think they're starting off hot. The bats look excellent, picking up where they left off last year before they got to the playoffs. Really don't have a lot of thoughts on anything right now other than I like that baseball is back. The Braves look good, and hopefully that continues. Hoping the pitching staff continues to get better and hopefully stays healthy throughout the year. But like where the Braves are at, we'll have Tyler Redmond on here in a couple of weeks to do our MLB prediction show. But Richard's rant. What you ranting about now, Richard?
Well, the Braves had an opportunity to sweep the Phillies on Sunday, but the guy that they got, who's apparently this great relief pitcher, Aaron Bummer, they traded away Mike Soroka to the White Sox for. He gives up the runs in the 7th. I mean, they had the lead, but that doesn't take away from what they did against the Phillies in the first 2 games. Those were statement wins. You know, you beat the Phillies 9-3 and 12-4. That just tells you, you beat Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler. And also, one thing I want to talk about is we need to change officiating in Major League Baseball. Max Fried, top of the first inning. He has a chance to get out of the inning. Bases are loaded. He throws a clear strike. This was an obvious strike. Would have been strike 3. The inning would have been over. And the Braves would have been up 2-0. Because of that, he walks in a run, and then the Phillies put up 2 more runs on the board, and he cannot get out of the first. We have got to do something about the umpires, balls, and strikes. I think...
Well, it is early. It is early, Rich.
It is. But I do think that coaches should be able to challenge 1 ball and 1 strike per game. If there's a close call, you should be able to challenge that. It should go to the computer. It should go to the robot to determine.
Maybe for that, but I feel like that's going to add more time. We're trying to speed the game up. Maybe there needs to be some mechanism in the mask of the umpires at this point with technology that's got like a strike zone for them to see where it's at to help them. Maybe like what we're seeing on TV. So something like that doesn't happen where he thinks it's high, but it's in the strike zone. I don't know how he didn't call that a strike. I mean, it's waist high.
It's right down the middle. The pitch is right down the middle. How do you not call that a strike?
But the fact that Braves fans are already making memes about this, and it's like, hey, it's game 2.
It's the Phillies.
But it's the Phillies, and you just wanted to make a statement. I get it, but Rich,
we had to make. This was one of those statements. Citizens Bank Park. You beat the brains out of the Phillies the first two games. The Braves are trying to prove they are the best team in the National League. And if they have to play the Phillies in the playoffs, well, guess what? They got Chris Sale now. I thought Chris Sale pitched incredible. 5 2/3 innings and only gave up the 2 runs. If Chris Sale is your number 3 starter, if he gets back to the form when he won the World Series with the Red Sox in 2018, and then you're throwing either Charlie Morton as your number 4 starter, Ian Anderson might come back from injury. The Atlanta Braves could have the best pitching rotation in all of baseball. And I'm not a believer in the Dodgers either. I think the Dodgers are very overrated.
Yeah, we'll talk about the Shohei Ohtani as more stuff comes out. Really no thoughts on that. But Richard already ranting and raving, talking about Bummer, the guy they traded for. What's his name? Bummer?
Aaron Bummer.
And
that is his real name.
Honestly, he wasn't a great relief pitcher, but he's someone that was trying to help bolster our bullpen. And already in first game he's being used, he blew it. And Richard's saying that was the worst trade they've seen because he's seen with Soroka. I'll tell you this, though. Richard, if he comes back and ends up having an excellent season, pulls like a Tyler Matzik, it will be on par with your predictions this year with Alabama going 6-6. UConn being lucky, and now this. But, hey, that's why I love you, Richard. That's why we do what we do. Because as much as we cover it, we still don't know a damn thing about it. I'm the same way. I had a Final Four. I didn't have pretty much no one. It was – actually, I didn't have anyone because I had Auburn, I had Arizona, I had Duke, and then I had – or I think, no, it was Kentucky, excuse me. At Kentucky, and then I had either Tennessee or Purdue, one of the two. Maybe I did have Purdue. Maybe I had Purdue. I don't know. But it just shows we don't know anything. All right, let's do it. Let's wrap up our show now as we throw up the graphic. Hello. Time for the high school baseball ratings. We're going to say consistent. I don't think there was much change except for the top 5. But the bottom 5, number 10, Harris County, they continue. They've been playing great baseball, Richard. They're 5-4 now in their last 9 after starting 1-8. Got some big wins. 2 out of 3 from Northgate. Beat Northside that last one. Beat Columbus High. And as they continue to get better, if they can win, from Rick Beach told me, they should be able to handle Drew because Drew's not really good at any sport. They beat Drew and sweep them and take at least 1 out of 3 against McIntosh. The team went to the state title last year. They'll at least get a home playoff game in the number 2 seed. They beat McIntosh or sweep them, they'll win the region. From starting 1-8, that was not looking promising to now maybe hosting a playoff game. Tony Dimitri, even though they may have a losing record at the end of the year, he's starting to get his feet underneath them. If they win a playoff game, I think this is something you build off of, especially what you got coming up the pipeline with all the talent from their JV team, from the little leaguers from last year that are coming up now as 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. Future's bright for Harris County. They are at number 10.
Oh, Thrift. Harris County, look at what they've done in the Southeast region when it comes to Little League World Series. Yeah, you're right. The future is bright. They're going to go on to play at Harris County in the next couple of years. And I think right now it looks very realistic for them hosting a playoff game and possibly getting the number 2 seed.
Number 9, I don't have much to say about them. They're 5-8, and they got a big one against Pacelli. They beat Pacelli. They'll move up in our ratings. I expect them to make the playoffs because, again, I think there's only 5 teams in their region. Hardaway's not. I think Shaw could be a 2 or 3. Bainbridge is pretty good. We'll see how they play, but they'll make the playoffs and Coach Shackelford.
Thrift, one thing, Hardaway took 2 out of 3 against Westover.
Oh, well, maybe Westover won't make it. Maybe it's going to be Bainbridge, Shaw, and Hardaway. Who knows? Maybe Shaw could be a host in a playoff game as they head into region play. We'll see.
No, they still got Cairo.
Yeah, and Shaw comes in at number 9. Number 8, the Jordan Red Jackets, man. They keep ascending. I could see them maybe in the top 7. They could jump Columbus. How about that? Jordan, 8-7. You'll be doing their game here in a week or so. They got spring break coming up, but I just love the Jordan Red Jackets story, the limited resources they got in this baseball program that has had history. of winning, and now they're at number 8.
Yeah, Coach Lane doing a great job with the Jordan Red Jackets team that does play Northeast in a doubleheader this week. But next week they'll take on Kendrick. And I think right now, if you look at the top teams, Ace Charter, by the way, Calvary Christian beat Ace Charter on Friday. I wanted to throw that out there. That's the top team in Jordan's region. And then Rutland, who Kendrick plays this week, they're the number 2 team. That's who Jordan beat. Rutland had suffered their first loss of the season. So they got a good region. They're battling for that playoff spot with Northeast, Southwest, and so they're hovering right at 4th and 5th place. But it looks like that Jordan will be able to make back-to-back playoffs. In last year, they made the playoffs as a number 4 seed. This year, I think they're going to make the playoffs as either a number 3 or number 4 seed.
Congratulations, and put Coach Lang up there as one of the best young coaches we got, and I expect great things from him. Columbus High did not look good against Thomasville, as now I think now they got coming up Chris County, and that's still going to be tough. If they don't beat Chris County, they'll be a 3 seed. They already beat Daugherty, they'll beat Monroe, and they beat Carver, so they're going to at least be a 3 seed. But dang, man, losing to Thomasville like that is for Coach Chad Mathis. They got good players, man. They're just having a tough season. This is not a team I don't think can win a state title this year. I really don't, Richard. As good as 3A is, unless they get hot here down the stretch. And they need to take their business against Chris. But 10-12, losing record. Not looking good for Columbus. Still going to make the playoffs, but not a Columbus team you've been accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, especially with the team that went to the Elite Eight last year. I think that Columbus is still in a very tough region with Thomasville. They were going into that series with Thomasville undefeated. They were 4-0. They were in first place, and Thomasville ended up sweeping them. And so right now, Thomasville's 4-0. Columbus is 4-2. They have got to at least split with Chris County if they want to try to host a playoff game.
Smith Station comes in at number 6. They got a big series against Auburn. They beat Auburn. It's going to be between now Smith Station, Opelika for who's going to make it behind Central in that region. Remember, they made it to the Final Four this year, but because of the region they're in, they could not even make the playoffs. Smith Station coming in at number 6, Richard. Big one against Auburn. They play at Auburn and then Auburn at home this upcoming week.
Yeah, and they had a tough series with Tuscaloosa County, but they're getting ready for that region game against Auburn. It's going to be a home and home. And, you look at there's only 4 teams in their region and 2 make the playoffs. And we talked about how good Opelika's doing. But Smith Station, they've split with Harris County. They've played some tough competition. And I think that Smith Station is poised and ready to take on the region opponents, which it's going to be tough. It's a gauntlet.
Top 5. The team that's been ranked number 2, ranked number 1 at the beginning of it, is now down to number 5. And a lot of this has to do with when talking with Coach Steve Smith. They had a 10-day layoff of not playing any baseball because of rainouts and cancellations. And it showed. They got pretty manhandled against Pacelli, 9-0. Pitching did not look good. Their hitters, they looked like they weren't awake. They were asleep at the wheel. They come in at number 5, 13-3 on the season. I think they're still going to finish strong, and they'll get their feet back under them. They're just having a tough stretch right now. A lot of that has to do because of the cancellations. Take nothing away from Steve Smith, but after losing LaGrange and Pacelli on Saturday, we had to move them down to number 5. They got a big one coming up against Glenwood here in 2 weeks. We'll be doing that, Richard. And I expect them to move back up here soon. But tough week for Calvary Christian.
Yes, tough week. Anytime that you play 2 games in one day, they had to turn around and they faced Pacelli in the morning. And then they had to hop on a bus and go up I-185 to face LaGrange. And we know how good LaGrange is. And that was a very close game. LaGrange ends up winning 3-2 on a 2-run homer in the later innings. But, they still play their gap schedule. and they're going to still play teams like Troup County, and they should be playing IMG Academy coming up, and then like you mentioned, Glenwood, Lakeside School. How about that Brookstone matchup on April the 23rd? I mean, they still got some good competition ahead.
Yeah, they do, and I expect them to finish out this season strong. Again, when baseball is a game of routine and repetition, and when you go a long period of without playing, especially when Pacelli's played well, they've played more games as of recently. They look like the better team, and that's expected. But Calvary will be just fine. Nobody should be freaking out. They got IMG coming up. I think they'll play well against them. Then they got a Gaps game. Then they got at Glenwood, at Troup, Lakeside, Troup at home, Northside, and Brookstone at home. I think this team will finish out strong down the stretch. Glenwood comes in at 9-6. Didn't have any games last week. They had spring break. They're coming back this week. Got a few games. Richard, coming up, I think they take on Abbeville, which is a
Deerfield Windsor.
Deerfield Windsor. So I expect Glenwood, after resetting the bar, resetting themselves, they're looking for another state championship, Richard. They are that I'm looking at basketball right now. I was trying to pull up their baseball schedule, as they are 9-6 on the season, and they got Deerfield Windsor, then Coosa Valley right after that. We won't be doing those games, and those are happening on Friday and Saturday this upcoming week. They haven't played in about a week or so. Then they got Southern Prep.
That's that all boys school up in Spring Hill, Camp Hill.
They'll smoke them. I think they'll beat Marion County. That showdown with Calvary. They're gonna have about 6 or 7 another wins on their belt. They'll be 15-6. That Calvary game is going to be pretty big. Then they got Heritage, and they ended against Terrell Academy before they head into the playoffs, which we will be doing right here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live. They come in at number 4.
Yeah, Coach Fanning's got a team that they did lose a lot of firepower from the championship team last year, like a Jackson Milam, a Jacob Page, a Lucas Holman. But I still believe you've got Mason McCrane that really, when he hit that 2-run homer against Pacelli in the Border Wars, I mean, he's got some pop in his bat. He's also a very good pitcher, along with Tyler Sykes. I mean, Coach Fanning is got them just feeling just the team and trying to figure out this schedule, because I think that they're going to be there when it's all said and done, when we get ready for the AISA playoffs.
Number 3 is a team that had the best week last week. They were the team of the week for sure. Beating Calvary the way they did, taking care of Westfield. Pacelli, 12-4. They got a game against Shaw coming up. Coach Thomas and Coach Bowers, I'm telling you, Walker Hilton looked great. Kimbrough was excellent. The pitching shut down an elite Calvary offense. Their defense looked great. I think Pacelli has just as good a chance to win a state title. We could have a Pacelli-Brookstone state championship, and they're both ranked in the top 3. Excellent week for them. They sweep Calvary, and they beat them 23-6 in 2 games. Calvary, 14-6 and 9-0. They just had their number this year. Great win for the Pacelli Vikings.
Yeah, 4-2 in the region, and their only 2 losses were to Brookstone. Right now, they're in 3rd place behind Strong Rock Christian, which they will face off in a 3-game series later. Heritage is a good team. They'll face them in region play. But right now, they just want to position themselves. When we get to the GIAA playoffs, they want to position themselves in the region where, when it's all said and done, that them and Brookstone are possibly the 2 teams left standing. I mean, they got to get in a good position. I think that Pacelli is. They're that team that really have overcome those region losses to Brookstone, and they've rattled off 4 straight region wins.
Brookstone, 17-3. They have now ascended to number 2 in our ratings. They swept Westfield. They beat St. Mary's. They beat Columbus. As I talked about, they've won 11 of their last 12. Their only loss was to at Pacelli. And by the way, in that series, the first 2 games, they outscored them 28-3. They got a big series coming up against Heritage next week. This coming week, they don't have any games because of spring break. Then they take on Strong Rock for who's going to win the division. Then they end the season against Calvary. So we're probably going to hit the Strong Rock game and the Calvary Christian one. So looking forward to doing that for Brookstone as they finish up at number 2. And then the number 1 team, we did them this past week on Wednesday. And after getting down 3-0, that's back-to-back games we've done, Columbus and LaGrange for Central, at Columbus and home against LaGrange. And Richard, this team just showed why they are ranked number 1 in the country in some ratings, number 3 in others. They're number 1 in our poll. They are elite. Even when they get down, they got the offense to get bat. They don't hit a lot of home runs. They don't need to. They get a lot of quality at bats. They got excellent pitching staff. And Coach A.J. Keogh's looking for a state championship number 2 and maybe even a national championship as the best team in high school baseball. They are just on a tear, 22-1. I don't know if they don't lose another game the rest of the season, especially if they get down against a good team coming up, maybe Opelika or Smith Station on the road, because they're going to get everybody's best shot with what they're doing this year. But they're number 1, and honestly, they're in a class of their own. And then it's the Calvary, Glenwood, Pacelli, Brookstone, the private schools. They're in their own class, and then it's everybody else. But Central, just playing elite baseball, they're going to stay number 1 for a long time, I feel like.
And rightfully so, especially when you're dominating at 7A. I mean, the competition that you are facing is you're not only battle-tested, but when you get into region play, it's Central and everybody else. Yeah. I think the Smith Station, Auburn, and Opelika are going to be fighting for that final playoff spot because I just don't see Central losing to any of these teams. They do everything well. They run for bases. They hit for contact. You mentioned They don't hit a lot of home runs. They don't really need to because they play small ball and they're able to move runners over. And their pitching has been absolutely lights out. Even though they get down, it's their bullpen that gets them, staying in games for the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th innings. And that's why Central has been absolutely great, and they're number 1.
They are number 1, and these are our high school baseball ratings. And Pacelli can win it, Brookstone, Glenwood, Calvary, and Central. Those 5 teams. We have 5 teams that can win state championships this year. We could have a team from the AISA, the GAPS, the GIAA, and the AHSAA all win state championships. They are representing baseball very well, and I expect great things for them. And, as softball, like Glenwood and Calvary both have their softball seasons going right now. If both those teams have either won national state titles in recent years, Calvary, or been to one, Glenwood, I expect Coach McConnell and Coach Susie Sparks' son, we're probably going to get one of their runs, baby, as they play for a state championship again. Looking forward to maybe doing some of them. I know soccer's going on right now. We try to talk all, but it's hard to cover all the sports. So if you got anything you want to help us out, you got information you want to help us spread, or you want us to help you spread the word out, just let us know. We promise you we'll be able to do that. Here is our this week's Top 10 high school baseball ratings, Georgia, Alabama Sports Live. All right, Richard, take that off. All right, we're about a couple minutes away from LSU and Iowa. Enjoy that. We're also about 20 minutes away from Shaw and Pacelli. Rick Beach, Chris Gates will be on the call for that one. This is the last time you'll see me and Richard. We'll be back in action on Sunday for the Georgia, Alabama Sports Live show. We got potentially Opelika Central, Smith Station, Auburn. Those are up in the air, but we potentially be doing those. We are doing for sure tonight. We'll just keep watch on our Facebook. That's why you got to like our Facebook page. We put all information out there if we're going to be calling the game that day or not. And then on Saturday, we got doubleheader, CVCC softball and baseball. Georgia, Alabama Sports Live. Me and Richard will be back doing our show. And then next week, back to the grind. We got Glenwood, Calvary, and we got several other big-time games around the area, Richard, that we are going to be doing. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. Like us on Facebook. Keep subscribing on YouTube as we just keep trucking along. And make sure to listen. I hope you enjoyed the Best of Sports Vision radio show. Me and DJ be back in studio on Thursday. Tune in, 92.1 Smooth R&B and the Sports Vision Facebook page. We are live on there. Make sure to tune in. Like us on Facebook. And thank y'all so much, everyone. Have a good night. LSU, Iowa, next. Richard's throwing the confetti on me. I don't know if that means LSU's winning or Iowa's winning because I picked LSU. So I'm getting the confetti. It looks like I'm going to be right. We'll see y'all later. Thank you for watching the Georgia-Alabama Sports Live Show presented by Glynn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. You're ready to smile.